So I have a note here about discussing the editing process of Icarus Reborn, and it's supposed to be going up Thursday. Well, that's today. So, I think about, I want to say, 6 months ago, I posted a video onto James Dragon going over me finishing Icarus Reborn's first draft, and I think that was from a live stream that I had streamed 2 months prior to that. Oh, it's 7 months. Okay, I see. So that's about 10 months ago. I actually finished Icarus Reborn, and it's not done. Now, that's because it just happened to be happening in the Broken Boy saga. And let's say it didn't get a lot of work done in Broken Boy saga. But no, we're back on it. We're back at it again. We're back at it again with the white vans. And we're going to finish it. There's been a bigger project that I've been working on that's going to need its own video. That's probably going to be a fairly long video of its own. Just going over what this bigger project I'm working on is. But this bigger project involves me actually finishing up the first draft. Oh, rather the second draft of Icarus Reborn. Now, Icarus Reborn, Draft 2. The reason this is going to have a second draft, most stories I write, I don't want to say more, maybe 95, 98% of stories I write don't have the second draft, because the first draft is usually good. I'm an experienced enough writer. I feel like this is an experienced thing. I feel like this isn't just a thing that writers happen to do. I feel like when you hit a certain level of writing and you've got enough experience on your belt, you don't really need second drafts mostly. Now, the reason I need a second draft for this series in particular is because of the fact, well, I really didn't like the first draft at all. Not anything to do with how fast I had written it. I had written it within a week, but I feel that's reasonable. Not just reasonable, I feel like that's what most writers should be keeping pace with anyways. But more than that, it wasn't the time period. It was more so just my experience level in writing it. It was a while ago. My prose definitely wasn't as strong as it is now, and having not completed a novel in a novelized format before. let's put it that way. Having not done that before, I feel like quite a few flaws actually slipped their way through, and it was learning experience mostly. And I feel like after I finished writing it, I was in a much stronger spot. And at the time, I had said that this is going to be the weakest writing I'm going to be putting forward. I'm not going to write something weaker than this going forward. And I was correct. Mostly correct. There are circumstances where I had to write something that I had no experience with, or I had no idea or had no actual engagement with the subject matter. So there's been some growing pain type of writings that I've done that have been maybe a bit weaker than this. But overall, of especially main writings that I've done haven't been weaker than this. And with that, I don't know how I feel about the story overall. I know it's a good story. I know the first draft is a good story, but I felt that with just a little bit of drafting, it can go from a good story to a good story. It can go from an average story to a good story. That's more so what I'm getting at here. There are flaws with it, and there's certain things about my writing style that I do now that I feel enhance my writing considerably that I hadn't started developing at this time. So I've injected some of those into here, and overall just reworked quite a few things. A few things. Now, again, I really don't know about doing second drafts. I think it depends on the project mostly. Again, 98% of the time, no second draft. But for certain particular things, a second draft I feel can be helpful, and I've gotten some good experience having edited through this. As much as I have. I feel like my grammatical capabilities have probably increased doing this, so it's been overall healthy exercise. Right now, I'm about at the 50% mark. I set out when I started editing this to have about 10,000 words cut out of it, and then I was going to write back, not most of it, but write back a few words. I've already cut out 10,000 words, and I've essentially cut out a chapter. It's coming together much, much stronger than it was before. I like the characters a lot more. I like the story a lot more. I feel like it's a better read than before, which should be obvious with the second draft, but I almost feel like this is coming out better than I thought it would at first. Not necessarily a huge margin better, but just a bit better than I thought it was going to be, which is good, I suppose. I have very mixed feelings about this story. Especially watching other isekai stories are kind of similar in tone or style to this. I feel bad. I feel bad about writing. I feel bad about the quality level of it because it's not the highest quality in the world, and I know I can do better, but I don't know. I feel like there's an important reason to publish a story, even if it's not good, or even if it is good, but it's just not great, I feel like that reason is compelling me to finish it and publish it. But still, there's just that part of me that's just yeah, this is terrible. I know it's not. I know logically speaking, it's not terrible, but it's just that emotional reaction I get when I read certain parts of it. Just like, oh, no, don't do this to me. And like, I feel like I've cut most of those parts out, so I should be able to find it tolerable now. I hope. Now, again, most of the way through this, I need to like edit a lot more. There's basically not a lot to do. I just have to write about 3 scenes there, write about a scene there. So I gotta write about 4 scenes, which is gonna be maybe about 8 to 12 pages or so, which is not a lot of pages to write out, and then not even much editing. So it's basically pretty close to being done. If I had written those 8 or so pages, if I had written out the scenes, then I would say, like, I would understand what level this writing is going to be at. And that would be interesting information to have, I suppose. I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter how good this is. I guess it doesn't matter. Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter. Now, let's actually get into some of the vegetables. I was going to say meat and potatoes, but that's not. I think the meat and potatoes is mostly just, like, the general conversation. Whereas, like, the vegetables is what we need to get into. I feel that, having like gone over this a few times, I feel like there's a few things I've learned. One of those things is I need to use commas less in short sentences. That's just like, I'm bad at that, apparently. But like, having edited through this, I feel my grammatical capabilities have sharpened quite a bit. And I've like learned a few things while going through this that should help me in the future. And that's why I would say, if you're the type of writer who doesn't do a second draft and you are presented an opportunity to do a second draft, it could be helpful. It could be helpful just in regards to improving your actual grammatical capabilities. As someone who doesn't put pen to paper often, was always my weakest part. Now, like, of course, my grammatical capabilities is better than it needs to be, but still, improving it is always a helpful thing, and always like, the more it's improved, the less I have to spend time actually editing and looking for mistakes, because the less mistakes there'll actually be. So that's one main helpful things. I want to talk about a concept that I had a while back, which is kind characters deliver more than unsympathetic and unkind characters. That even a villain should still have kindness to them, and still should have, like, chivalrous and good qualities to them. And I feel that makes your cast of characters much stronger overall if they have aspects to them that are kind and charitable and good. And just, like, they have part of their nature that is just, like, genuinely good about them. And I've kind of applied that to this writing a bit more. There's just certain aspects of writing that I just, like, kind of made the characters better. Just, like, better human beings. Just literally just better human beings. I just, like, made them kinder people who just, like, saw the good in others and, like, were more helpful than negative. And I feel like that was the main thing that helped this come together better. Before, the main villain, if you can call them such, the main antagonist, let's say, of the story, really, I feel, was probably the weakest part. And there were scenes with the main antagonist that were important to the narrative, so they still had to be there. But the weakness of the character was very, very apparent. And so taking the character and taking them from this very, very antagonistic, very much like almost a mustache-twirlingly evil character, and giving them sympathy and giving them charitable traits and almost making them a force for good within the main character's world, rather than a force of just like pure indifference and hate, made this a lot stronger. It made a lot stronger of a story. So even though the character is still there, I've basically taken the character from a villain to a good guy, and that's like a very, very drastic change, but like it's the change that made the most sense, because like the original character was basically this outer shell of like evil and hate and visceral, but on the inside actually just wanted the best for the people around them and didn't want to see the same mistakes made again. And just giving them that little bit of extra kindness, just giving that little bit like they're kind of like more sympathetic and more charitable, turned them into a much, much stronger character, and like turned them from this like mustache trolling villain into just an actual sympathetic ally that like still can pose almost like I want to say like a dichotomy between the main character and them, that they might believe something different than the main character. They might have an opposition. They might believe in a different value than the main character believes in, but because they're a good person, them and the main character can work together in such a way that both of them are better off having known and worked against each other or worked with each other going forward. I feel like that's incredibly important to this story in particular, and incredibly important to a lot of my writings, is just like inserting that little bit of good into the villainous characters, into any of the characters, giving them a trait that is a helpful, good trait, makes them stronger, makes them more well-rounded, and just ends up making the characters flesh themselves out, mostly. Because when I'm writing, I'm not like thinking like, I'm going to make this character like this. It just comes out naturally. But when you give them that one extra trait, then that character just kind of morphs and changes before your eyes into a character that's just stronger and better than you could have expected that character to be, because you just gave them that one little push forward, and that just was worth miles. That's the main thing. Now, this doesn't have a very strong voice or sense of tone. I hadn't mastered those things when I had started writing this, and they still don't. But I've noticed that, like, a lot of things I thought were going to be bad aren't as bad as I thought, and a lot of things I thought were good aren't as good as I thought, and pretty much just that. And the average things were pretty much just average. Usually a bit better than I thought they were going to be. So overall, the story is, like, better than I thought it was going to be, but still, like, not like leaps and bounds better, just a bit better than I thought it was going to be. And having rewritten and cutting out most of those bad parts that I didn't like, while not going crazy about it, while not like rewriting every word, just cutting out things I just felt made it weaker overall. Again, cutting out 10,000 words instead of cutting out 40,000 words. That's kind of the differences we're talking here. Just doing that, I feel made it a lot stronger overall, because even though there's something about me that really doesn't like this story, just cutting out those parts that really, like, get under my skin personally, that I know other people will read and say, oh, that's an okay line, it's not the strongest, but it's okay. The things that got under my skin, cutting those out, makes me feel a lot better about the story, and I feel like makes it a lot stronger overall. Even if, like, technically speaking, it's not the biggest difference in the world, it makes the perception of the overall story change. So, like, the story itself, not biggest. It's like, you're not changing the sum of the pieces a lot. No, that's the exact opposite of what I want to say. You're changing the sum by just changing some of the pieces. You don't actually change the pieces a lot, but just by cutting out those handful of things that really bother you and replacing them with things you actually enjoy and like, that makes the overall sum of the story feel a lot more solid. And I feel that even comes through for other people reading the story. I'm obviously looking at the story here as I'm doing this, and I'm mostly just looking at the notes here. There's a few things that, like, you know, fixing like inconsistencies or fixing like spelling mistakes or like misdemeanors. Like the main character was calling his parents in his narration mom and dad, but or whatever, the variant of that, father or mother. He was calling them that in his narration, whereas later it becomes a very apparent character trait that he doesn't ever call them mother or father when he's narrating. He only says that when he's speaking aloud. And so, like, I had to fix that. There's a few other things along those lines that need to be fixed or need to be done. And even things that, like, happen that I feel set up for later things better. Like, there's a fight in this. The original fight I had cut. In the original second draft, the first time around, I cut the fight. I was like, oh, this fight doesn't work here. I don't like the fight at all. But having reworked it, and again, just giving the bad characters some more sympathy, I was like, okay, now I like the fight. The fight has to happen because it's important now, and, like, gives characterization. But also, it gives me access to another character that I can give more character development to. But more than just giving that character development, by adding them into the mixture of this scene that's going on, I also, incidentally, added some foreshadowing for later things that are going to happen in the story. So, like, even making minor changes, taking a fight that I didn't think worked in the initial thing, changing the villains to be more sympathetic, made me think, okay, the fight has to happen now. And then, by adding in some more elements from this part of the story over here and working them together, I end up making a whole that, like, adds something to the overarching story that wasn't there in the initial draft. It adds a piece of the narrative that, like, is important for later on. I'm not explaining this great. What I'm saying is, even if something feels like you should be cut, sometimes just adding other elements of the story in there, not just to, like, make that one scene better, sometimes just pulling those elements in and mixing them with this thing that's separate from what was there initially, creates a wholly new thing that adds to the story in a unique way that you wouldn't have foreseen. I'm overall a fan of, like, mixing things together and taking separate ideas and just, like, pushing them together and see what happens. And I feel like I don't give it enough credit that it actually does potentially make the story far stronger when you do things like that in unexpected ways you don't actually see coming. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what I'm trying to say. I could have said that better, but whatever. Whatever. Me saying things good? No, never. One thing I really like. Oh, I gotta bring it up. Okay, I'm gonna switch screens and then I'm gonna show it. This, I really like this. Okay, I'm a fan of, I lost it, I had it and lost it. I'm a fan of the conceptual idea of ergodic literature. Now, ergodic literature is when you play with the medium of putting a story together, specifically in like the form of novelizations. Now, overall, I think that is the way you take advantage of a medium, is you play with what people expect from that medium and do things different from what they expect and actually take advantage of the medium you're using. Now this year, I did a couple of these of like just changing the font or changing the size or doing little things to have impact. I feel like this actually adds very good. I like this. I like this here. I like if other novels had this, I would very much be more respectful towards the medium overall. But like doing things like changing the font and changing the sizing and changing the things to give impact or give emphasis or to like change the tone or the feel of what you're reading, I feel is just like a really, really good thing to have. And like as soon as that flip switched in my head, like, oh, if I just do a couple little small things here, the impact will be massive. This I really like. I really like this change to the story. I feel like this adds quite a bit, and this adds quite a bit to my writing overall going forward when I'm writing in this medium. Because for something like manga, I already know how I'm going to play with that medium. I already know like how to play with panels and compositions and other things in order to like take the most out of that medium and give it more emphasis. But for a medium like writing, which I'm less experienced with, or like novelization, I should say, that I'm less experienced with, doing things like this, I think is really helpful, and I need to think about this more and figure out more tactics and more strategies in order to like paint a better picture and like work the reader into the narrative further, while also not breaking the rules per se, but to go outside the bounds of what people expect in order to deliver something unique and interesting that people haven't seen before. I feel that's incredibly important and something people need to think about more. All in all, this is a good change to this novel, good start to the series. I've also changed the length of the series. I didn't have like a perfect image in my mind of how long it was going to be, but probably like around the 20 volume mark was like the original length, like ish. I didn't have a perfect image, and then I think I brought that down to about the 12 volume mark. But now I'm picturing, not just picturing, but I've worked this story out in my head enough that like I know that it's only going to be 6 volumes long, and that's how I'm going to deliver the narrative. So working within that construct, I feel like is a much clearer image of what I have to get done in each novel, and using that, I feel like that really was a helpful just framing device for going in and making changes to this, knowing exactly how long it's going to be, exactly what I have to put into each novel to make sure the overarching story is delivered properly. So that was an incredibly helpful thing. This is overall a really good exercise, and I no longer hate myself. I no longer hate the story, I should say. My child, the story. Oh no. Also, having already read the bonus chapter, which I had edited not too long ago, I like it. I like the bonus chapter. I didn't think I would like anything from this, but the bonus chapter was perfect. I didn't have to touch it, basically. I didn't have to touch it. I was like, oh yeah, this is perfect. So like, before I even got to the second volume, I was already writing that good stuff, my dude. Writing the good stuff. Now, with that said, it's probably because I introduced a particular character within that time range, and ever since that character was introduced, and that character being like the main reason for me writing the story, that's probably why it came out good, because I actually cared about that part. I just hit the microphone, that's fine. When you actually have a character you enjoy, you're actually writing about something you care about, it comes out better. This is my basic advice. I hope you've learned a lot from this, because I haven't learned anything. I didn't learn anything. Okay, so I gotta finish editing this, and then eventually record the actual video on like the bigger project that I'm working on that involved me actually finishing this. So look forward to that, or click on the video if it's out already, or subscribe. Other words, stuff. Good. Buy my book. Buy my books. I know I just spent this whole time ragging on him, be like, this isn't that great. This isn't my best work. This isn't great. But like, buy it anyway, or else I'm coming to your house and I'm making you chili. Actually, I won't do that because you might like chili. Who doesn't like chili? What? Buy it or I won't make you chili. I think we have an ultimatum here.